Okay, let's explore the Type tool. In the toolbar, the T represents your Type tool or text tool, and you can see next to the name, the letter T in parentheses, that's the shortcut for the tool. So if I just press T on my keyboard, it takes me right to it. And if you'll notice in the bottom right corner of that tool, there's a black triangle, and what that tells me is there are additional tools that are related underneath. So I have to click and hold the mouse down to open that menu, but in order for me to keep the menu open, I have to move the mouse to this edge called a tear off and release the mouse, and now they are all available to me. Let's just start with the first one, the regular Type tool. Click, type, straightforward. You have options, however, that have opened up in the top that are directly related to your Type tool. You have the ability to change the style of letter or font. So I've highlighted that text, and I'm coming in here to find whatever. I'm just going to go to Arial because it's straightforward. We'll go to Arial. Changed my style. If I see this next field here, sometimes only one characteristic is available, sometimes more than one, but in this case we could have regular text, so it's a little thinner. We could italicize it to put it on an angle. We could just do plain old bold, which thickens it, or bold and italicize together. We'll go back to regular. And size, it's measured in points, so you can either pick from the drop down these pre-formatted points, or you can click and type points and press return, or you can use the up and down arrows to adjust. In addition to this area here for resizing, you could just use your select tool, and you could go to any of the handles, corner, side, top, bottom, and click and drag to resize. And whatever the size is you end up with, it does show you in the window. Okay. Next, there is also the ability to add a stroke, and in Illustrator as well as Photoshop, a stroke is a line or an outline. So I'm going to take the text tool and I am going to just select a few. I could select all or just a few. And I'm going to put a line around those letters. Now, when I put a 10-point line around, that's pretty big. It's increased the size of my letters greatly, and it automatically gave me this red stroke color. You could click this drop down and you could make that color anything you wanted it to be. Let's go with a green. And you can see down here also, stroke is this outlined box, whereas fill is the solid box. But right now we're playing with the stroke itself. And when I clicked on it, you see these panels have opened up. And again, I can keep them open or I could close them. If I deselect right now, because this is so enclosed, it's so close together, I'm not actually seeing a fill color. I'm only seeing the stroke color, because based on the size of this text, adding a 10-point stroke is too much. So I'm just going to reduce the size so I can still see the fill color. So all my text is still black, and I've put an outline around a few letters. You could have outlined all of them, just a few of them to accent them, or none of them at all. You can have characteristics on some and not all. You also have, there's a characteristic panel that can open. And let's go to Window, and it's all about the type. And we're going to open the character panel. Okay. In this character panel, you have your size again, so you can adjust the font size. You also have what is called leading. You have the option to adjust the leading, and based on this symbol here, you can see a little arrow from the bottom of the top letter to the bottom of the letter below. What that means is it's adjusting the space between lines. So although we don't have multiple lines of text here, so I cannot show you that at the moment. But what I can show you is the tracking. Tracking is the space between the letters. So I'm increasing the size, and as you might notice, the J is moving away from the D. I could also drop it down this way, and let's put some letters stacked here so I can show you. Let's highlight these now. We'll go back up here to the leading, and again, you can use the drop down to adjust the space. You could use the arrows to adjust the space. You don't have to adjust all of them. Let's just say we want to adjust these two. Oops, just this one. So some lines can be closer than others. Some letters can be closer than others. Let's drop this back to 5. Look at that. Lots of freedom to make changes here. Okay, so in your character panel, you could also have changed the font style, the characteristics of the font, the size, the space between lines of text, the space between letters, and this would be the space just between two. And I think that is probably enough. Also, though, I do see we have that opacity. So let's say we have a shape. Let's just create a shape here. Okay. So, and let's change that color. So this shape could represent a photo. It could represent a drawn object. And right now it's covering my text, but I want to have my text covering that shape or photo. So in this case, I'm going to go to the layers. I have one layer, and I see in there, I have my text below, and I have this red shape above. I can click and drag to change the order. And now I have my text up above laying on top of that shape, or it could be a photo. Okay, now let's just beef it up a bit, and let's look at making that text transparent. So go to my text tool, and right now, oops, I'm sorry, let's just double click. Okay, right now with that text selected, I see it's 100% opaque. That means it's 100% solid. I could type a number in that's lower, or I can click and drag. And what this does is it makes it transparent. If you go to 0, you don't see it anymore. But somewhere in between 0 and 100, you can get transparency. So let's zoom way in here. Because there's no detail in the red, it's tough to see, but right here in the outline or stroke, you can see the transparency of the letters. So, of course, the transparency of the letter, that means this black letter is not as black as the others. It's become a gray because we're seeing white through it. This one is more of a reddish gray because we're seeing the red through it. The green is not as green. So, you can pick one letter to make transparent, you can pick groups of letters to make transparent, but you can make your text transparent. And it will only affect whatever you've selected and made that change to. Let's look at making display text now. So let's get rid of that field, and we don't need that anymore either. So let's say you have a headline to create, or you simply want text that is descriptive in its look. So, for instance, flower. I'm going to fill the text with an image. So if you're going to fill text with an image, you don't want something really thin and petite. You want to have some space to actually fill it. So the size and style can really make a difference. So I'm just going to increase this size nicely, put it across the top, And I am not really crazy about how close together these letters are, so I am going to separate them, and that is going a little slow. I could use the drop down, but now they're separated. I'm good with that. Okay. So I have my text that I want to make descriptive, and I'm going to jump onto the internet real quickly and find a picture. You may already have a picture available that you would be working with. You could either right-click, copy the image and paste it in, or you could save the image and then open it into Illustrator, but I'm just going to paste it now, Command V or Control V. Now, it is supersized. It is way too big for my use. So I can either scroll till I find the handle in the corner and reshape it, or while it was selected, huge, I could come to the top and adjust the width and height. So right now it's almost 21 inches wide by almost 14 inches high. So let me just go to, say, 10 and 7. I'm just shrinking things down here. You can yourself decide what works. And then, okay, I have it in place. I'm going to place it over the letters for the moment. But I don't want, flower is my text layer. Somehow I just have this extra one I'm going to delete. Okay, the picture, when I paste a picture in, it comes in what looks like a folder, and it's labeled group. We don't want to leave it in there. If I had simply saved this photo and then opened it into Illustrator, it wouldn't be put in a group. But when you paste it in, for some reason, it goes in a group. So I'm just clicking on it and dragging it out above the group, made that little folder go away. But one last shift, we need to put the picture under the text. So I can either leave the picture as it is or the photo as it is, or I can resize it more, or I could resize the text. It's up to you. But once you have the photo basically sized and placed, what we're going to do is apply a mask to it so that the imagery behind the letters shows through those letters. And to do that, if you'll notice right now, this photo is selected, and you know that because of the handles, and you know it because of this little blue box here. If I click up here, now I know the text is selected, but you need both selected. So hold your Shift key and select both of them, and make sure both layers are actually selected as well. Go to your Object drop-down, Clipping Mask, and Make. And now your imagery is actually inside your letters. You could also, and you notice the two have been put into what looked like a folder called Group. Okay, we could select just the photo that is behind the text, and I can use the arrows on my keyboard to shift the placement of it so I see a different view of the photo. You can always do that. You can also simply shift the text, and you could resize it. Of course, if you go beyond what the photo is, then you get blank spots. Let's see. Could we, look at that. We could even change the font. Let's see what this font would look like. Let's do it. Well, I mean, I'm not fond of it, but I'm glad to show it. You could also put a stroke on the outline. So I'm going to undo just for a moment. I like this rounder, fuller font. And I do want to put a stroke on that, just a fine one, because flowers aren't bulky and heavy. So I just want to put a nice outline around the letters just to finish off the look. So now let's deselect the tool, and you can see the effect of the stroke. Next, you could also have text with drop shadows. So we're going to make a new layer for additional text because the mask would end up applying to anything else we put inside this group. So I'm just going to close that layer and move on to a new one, and even lock it just so I don't accidentally put anything else in there. So whatever your next word might be that you want to display, perhaps it's trees. Let's get creative here. And resize to whatever size works for your display text. And of course, whatever color you choose. And you can click the fill bucket down here. You can use the fill color up here, or you could use the fill color up here. Doesn't really matter. Okay. But if you wanted to apply, and I'm just going to get rid of that again because I find it distracting. If you want to apply, say, a drop shadow, you'd go to Effects. And again, explore effects. There's all sorts of things. But a drop shadow is style. You're stylizing the letters. So let's put a drop shadow, nice effect, and drag this window to the side or above so that you can click preview and see changes as you make them. You just have to be patient because every time you do something, it's going to sort of refresh itself. So I see a haze that sort of occurred when I went right into drop shadow. And I see also that there is quite a blur. I'm going to undo the blur completely, and look at that. The drop shadow is there. You couldn't see it very well as it blurred. You might want to blur the words so they're not as clear in the drop shadow, or you might want to completely create sort of a haze in the background like it was when I first opened. But to me, I like to actually see the letters still, but take them only slightly out of focus. So maybe just a little bit. Okay, now X offset, Y offset. That's simply how far away from the original letters you want your shadow to be. I usually like mine to be just offset slightly from the actual letters. And of course, opacity, that's how solid or see-through the shadow is. And the shadow, of course, has a blur. So even though we're seeing solid color, it's not necessarily in focus, which is fine. And you could, right now it's set to darkness, so it's just a dark color. You could specify by going to color, and then once it switches, we can go into that box and pick the actual color of your drop shadow. And these are layer modes in this drop down. I don't really believe any change to the layer mode is going to make a difference in a drop shadow. Doesn't mean you can't explore. Yeah, they're really not making much of a difference. So just keeping your layer mode for a drop shadow on normal is fine because nothing's changing. And click OK. So again, you can put strokes, you can use masks to fill. You could even put a stroke actually on to this display text. You just need to select it, come in, and as always, pick a size for your stroke, and then through here you could pick the color, or we certainly don't want red for the stroke on a red letter. That would make no sense. Or you can come into stroke over here in the tools panel, and so on. That would not work either. I like blue. Okay. And you could play around with the size again of your stroke. Okay, let's explore some of the other type tools. So we're just going to close and lock that layer, and we'll scroll up because we have this nice big artboard, and let's create a new layer to work with. So let's reopen the type panel using the tear off, and we're going to explore what these others do. Basically, this area type tool and vertical area type tool, they do the same thing. They fill an area either vertically or horizontally with text. And the type on path tool, vertical type tool, and vertical type on path tool, also all three of those pretty much do the same thing. On the path, though, this text, the base of text is along the path. With the vertical, It is going to run straight up and down, and with the vertical type on path tool, the text actually lays down against the path. So what is a path? In Illustrator, anything you draw is considered a path, and a path is a sequence of anchor points that are connected by arcs or angles. So the first tool we would normally learn to create paths in Illustrator is the pen tool. So the basics of your pen tool. This first tool is to create. This next tool, the add anchor point, is to add additional anchor points to a path. The delete anchor point tool is to delete anchor points from a path. And convert anchor point tool is to adjust the arc or angle between two anchor points. If you want to move the placement of an anchor point, you'd use this white arrow or direct selection tool. All of the tools, the line tool, the rectangle, and all these other pre-created shapes, the paintbrush, and the pencil, all of them create paths just like the pen tool creates a path. It's just the process of creating is slightly different for each tool, but these editing tools work for all of them. So with the pen tool, you'd plot points. Click, click, it connects with straight lines. Click, it connects with straight lines. Click, and so on. It just keeps connecting with straight lines. I've started where I stopped, so I have a closed path. You also could do click to plot a point. Click, hold the mouse down and drag to get an arc. Click and drag to get an arc. Click, click and drag to get an arc. Or you could alternate. Click, click to get straight, click, click to get straight, click, and click and drag to get an arc. So there's different, however you want to use the tool. Arcs and angles. If you find you need to add more detail, you might add anchor points. You might come here, click directly on the path, you've added another anchor point, which means you have the ability to adjust the arc or angle. So we'll take that convert anchor point tool, click and drag to get what are called handles. Handles pull out from an anchor point so that you're able to make adjustments to the shape by changing the arcs and angles. Okay, so that's one tool, is the pen tool. Paintbrush, it's more of a freeform tool. You don't plot anything. The computer is just generating the anchor points based on where you use the brush. So I could take that sub-select tool and click directly on the path, and I'd see all of the anchor points that are in there. And you can click on any anchor point to activate it and then click and drag it so that you can reshape whatever you drew. A straight line tool or any of these lines, it's pretty straightforward. Click and drag. The pre-created shape, same thing. Click and drag, and whatever that pre-created shape is, it will create it. And the pencil tool, again, it's a free-form tool. The paintbrush, however, you could apply these different strokes to, so it doesn't have to be that plain line, whereas the pencil tool, it's going to be more straightforward. So these are ways to create paths. Okay, so let's make a path and apply some text to it. So I took my paintbrush, and we're going to create a little more reasonable path than that crazy shape up above. So all I did is use my paintbrush going across, and I'm going to do a type on path tool. Click right on the path. It's no longer a line that's editable as a drawing. I could adjust the path for the text, and the text just keeps following whatever direction that line goes in. Let's make a path that we fill now. So we could take just an already created shape. Well, let's try this polygon shape. Okay, and let's just shrink it a bit to fit the space. And either of these area tools are going to work the same. They'll just look slightly different. So we're going to click inside the shape. Now the drawn shape is gone as far as being an object. It's now a text path, and we're going to fill it. But if you notice, I have to put a space in every so often, it's going to keep filling to create that shape. So you can create paths that fill with a shape, and then they can hold the look of that shape. When they're deselected, right now we didn't fill that much, you can create a path and you can apply text onto that path. Also creates a shape or a flow, whatever you're looking for. Paths can be created by using your pen tool, by using your line segment tool, any of the pre-created shapes, paintbrush, and pencil.